Hi guys. Well, as promised, I'm going to read a little bit of Mike out to you. This came out a couple of weeks ago. There we go. It's a little different to the other before Safe Havens. This is actually a novel. The others were novellas. Runs nearly 3 times the length of those. And it's different in another way. It's done in 2 parts. The first part is when Mike was in the prison, the young offenders prison. And it's about what happened to him then, which was significant and pivotal in what made him becoming the person that he is, the person that leads the group in Safe Haven. So what I'm going to read for you today is the first chapter, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you've not read it yet and you don't want it spoiling for you, then turn off now. But if you'd like to hear it, then please carry on listening. Now, I will say, like I always say, I'm not a professional narrator. I don't do the voices and all that kind of thing. You know, professional narrators are incredible. They have amazing talent, like Sean Salzman, who's doing Safe Haven Rise of the Rams for us. But this will hopefully give you a feel for what Mike is, anyway. The door closed behind Mike with a loud metallic clunk. The interior of the room was painted a shade of dirty magnolia, the furniture was bolted down, and above the sound of whispering chats the occasional mother's cry could be heard. At the far end of the large hall sat Alex. Just as Mike had asked, he was alone. Mike did not want the rest of the family to see him like this. The entire institute was decorated in a toxic ooze that bled hopelessness, and as much as he longed to see the rest of his family, he did not want to put them through this ordeal. The pair hugged affectionately, under the watchful eye of a female guard. "That's long enough, Mike. You don't want people getting the wrong idea about you," she joked. Mike and Alex broke their embrace and sat on opposite benches, a tatty-full mica-covered table separating them. "Stupid question, but how are you?" asked Alex. "Fine," replied Mike. "Fine, that's it." "What do you want me to say, Alex?" "Something more than fine." "Look, it is what it is. I fucked things up, only it's not just me who's had to pay the price, is it? I don't regret what I did to that prick, but I regret that I'm in here." Mike rolled his eyes. "See, that's a big part of your problem, son. You think you should always be able to dole out your own justice, but the world simply doesn't work that way. It's good you want to protect your family, but you need to think before you act. If somebody says something that upsets you, you can't just beat the crap out of them," Alex said, pushing back from the table. Mike scowled at Alex and straightened up. What he said to Sammy was a fucking disgrace. To tell an impressionable child her dead mum isn't going to heaven, he needed educating as to the error of his ways. "I agree, it was a disgrace, and if you hadn't intervened I would have had a word with him and written to the head of the diocese. But I guess they won't be too receptive after you've beaten one of their priests half to death, will they? I don't want to talk about this anymore." Alex opened his mouth to speak, then thought better of it. "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" "How are Sammy and Jake? How's Em?" "Sammy is missing you like crazy. Jake is a bit bewildered as to what the hell's going on." "And Em?" Mike pressed. She's what?" "Your sister's mad as hell at you, Mike." "So nothing new there then," he replied. "What's the anger management program like?" Alex asked to change the subject. "They've got me going to see this guy twice a week. On the upside, I don't want to punch anybody else now, just him," said Mike, smiling. "Don't let me hear that crap, Mike," the female guard called over. "Sorry, Serena." "That's Guard Romano in, mate," she replied, giving him a hard stare. "Sorry, Guard Romano." Mike turned back to look towards Alex. "Anyway, this guy's a complete knob. Comes from money, never had to work a day in his life, and he thinks he can just sit there making notes and judging me." "They don't let people who aren't qualified do these jobs, Mike. And maybe, just maybe, he might be able to help you, if you get down from your high horse long enough to let him," Alex said. "Look, everybody tells me what I did was wrong, but I know in my heart it was right. That priest was a piece of shit, and I could have argued with him until I was blue in the face and it wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference. Getting an apology from the diocese, how the fuck would that have helped Sammy? She needed to know someone was looking out for her, Mike said, slamming the table, then glancing quickly at the guard Glancing quickly at the guard, Serena just looked away. Alex leaned in. "Well, you did a bang-up job there, didn't you? How are you looking after Sammy now?" "I've had enough of this shit. I'm going back to my cell," snapped Mike, standing up. "That's right, Mike. Run away when it gets too hard. Run away, throw a punch, and let everyone else pick up the pieces afterwards," Alex called after him as he walked off. As Mike walked away, he heard Serena say, "It's been difficult for him," to Alex, and Mike nearly turned back to them but decided just to carry on. He stood in front of the thick metal door and tapped at the window. A guard's head appeared, and a second later a buzzer sounded, releasing the locking mechanism and opening the door. Mike walked through and headed down the corridor. His cell was a fair distance, and by the time he reached his door, he was already regretting losing his temper. He would not see Alex again for another week. Yet another fuck-up in a long line of fuck-ups. When Alex had first come into Mike and Emma's lives, he was a usurper, someone intent on stealing their mother away from them. It would have been easy for Alex to keep his distance, but instead he kept battling, doing whatever he could to build a relationship with the kids he'd inherited. And even as pig-headed as Mike was, eventually he had to admit Alex was a really good man. He'd become the only positive male influence Mike had in his life, and now Mike was kicking himself for his outburst. He walked into his cell and saw a jiffy envelope on his bed. It had already been opened, but he peeled back the flap. Inside was a book from his gran with a letter. He read the first few lines of the letter, and tears began to well. He wiped them away with the ball of his palm and placed the letter back in the envelope. He looked at the cover of the book, Different Seasons, featuring The Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. Funny. She's got a real sense of humour, our gran, Mike thought, smiling. Mike lay down on his bed and began reading, but only got through the first few pages before he drifted off to sleep. Saturday afternoons were always quiet at the Institute. There were not many duties scheduled, and if any of the inmates had a hobby, Saturdays and Sundays were the best time to pursue them. The buzzer sounded for dinner, and he woke with a start. The afternoon sun was still strong and blazed into his cell. His eyes blinked slowly, adjusting, and he enjoyed a few moments of believing he was actually back at home, before the reality of the situation kicked in and knocked his heart back a beat. The lock on his door clicked. He opened it and stepped out into the hallway, joining the procession as it made its way into the dining hall. On entering, Mike noted a distinct change of climate. Something was amiss. A sense of foreboding prickled around every prisoner, each man trying only to serve his time and get out in one piece. At Priory Bridge, young offenders' prison, Saturday had been a time for levity and buoyancy when entering the food hall and picking up one's tray. The first week it had been tacos, the second week burgers and fries, and today the menu had promised pizza. Mike looked across to the stainless steel serving counter where he saw slices of cheesy pepperoni being flopped onto trays, with sides of salad and jelly for dessert. The looks on the faces of the inmates were far from buoyant, though. Their eyes darted around the place nervously, searching every corner, every crevice, waiting to see something happen, waiting to see a lit fuse. "Hey, Mr. Loner, keep your head down," whispered an unfamiliar voice. In the weeks Mike had been here, he had kept to himself, not mixing with anyone, but now he was grateful for the friendly advice as the tension in the room became more palpable. Mike looked sideways to see if he could get a glimpse of the person who'd spoken to him, but no one seemed close enough. He continued to look around the hall. What is it? What's happening or about to happen? Suddenly, hands began to drum slowly on the grey formica-covered tables. Mike felt like the kid left standing in a game of musical chairs. Everyone seemed to know what was going on except him. Suddenly plates, food and glasses of Coke flew in every direction. The guards in the hall had no idea what was causing the ruckus or which direction to run first. Then Mike caught it out of the corner of his eye. A brief ceasefire held as all the inmates stood and a path cleared for a tall, well-built thug called Cole. He began to run towards another prisoner, much smaller, almost frail-looking, who just stood there like a deer struck frozen in oncoming headlights as everyone else watched. As quickly as it had quieted, the food flew again in 100 different directions, and the guards were so desperate to stop it that they completely missed the unfolding action on the far side of the hall. In a lightning flash, Cole was on top of the smaller boy, pounding his face with hammer-like fists. The boy did not retaliate, and after a few seconds he lay there perfectly still. The path through the crowd of prisoners closed again like water flowing back into a trough, and Cole disappeared into the throng of bodies. He was at the other end of the hall when he gave the signal to one of his pals to raise the alarm, by which time 8 more guards had entered the food hall and the place was in lockdown. 2 prisoners in white outfits who helped at the infirmary accompanied a doctor with another guard into the hall. They put the unconscious inmate on a stretcher and carried him out. Mike returned to his cell not long after, the prospect of pizza just a memory as his stomach rumbled. The door closed behind him and he flopped down onto the bed. This was going to be a long few months. He lay there looking towards the ceiling. He heard something beneath him. "Hey," came a voice. Mike looked around the room but could not figure out where the word had come from. "Down here," the voice called. Mike climbed off his bed and dropped to his stomach. There was a small grate in the wall and he could see movement through the cavity on the other side. "Hello?" said Mike. "Looks like we'll be going hungry tonight, my friend." The voice sounded familiar. It had the same accent as the person who had warned Mike earlier in the chow line. "You were the one who gave me the heads up in the hall." "Yep, that was me. Seemed like the neighbourly thing to do," he said. "I am Nazarat, but my friends call me Naz." "Nazarat?" asked Mike. "That's right, I'm Armenian. Came over here when I was 5, he replied. "I'm Mike." "You've no need to introduce yourself, priest killer," said Naz. "I didn't kill anyone," Mike replied. "As you say," chuckled Naz. "Word spreads quickly in here. So what did he do? He tried to fiddle with you or something?" "He's not dead, and no, nothing like that." Whatever." "What was that about in the hall?" asked Mike. "You need to be careful," said Naz. "Cole runs things around here. You do not cross him, Michael. You don't even make eye contact with him, understand?" "Run things? How can he run things?" "His brother is a big-time gangster on the outside. Drugs, prostitution, all sorts of shit. They've got half the guards in here on their payroll to make sure little brother is looked after. So I'm not shitting you around. Do not mess with him or his boys." "His boys?" asked Mike. "He has a gang in here. You mess with one, you mess with them all. Stay out of their way, or you will get the same treatment as that kid at lunch." "What brought it on?" Mike asked. He saw Naz's head drop a little. "Stupid little shit, thought he could run a card game in here and not pay a tribute to Cole," said Naz as his Armenian accent helped to emphasize the profanity. "Tribute? A slice of the action." "I see." Mike paused for a moment to digest this information. "What are you in for, Naz?" "This and that," replied Naz. "Well, I'm going to watch some TV. See you around." Naz put up a piece of card against the grill, blocking the light from that side and ending the conversation. Mike remained there under his bed for a moment, wondering what the hell kind of place this was. Eventually he climbed onto his bed, reached for the remote and turned on the TV. It was Saturday evening. He flicked through the channels, hoping he could find something that might at least take his mind off his surroundings for a while. But game shows and chat shows rarely put Mike in a good mood, so after only a couple of minutes, he turned the TV off again. He reached across to his bedside table and picked up the book his gran had sent him. He flicked open the cover. "While you are away, you will be the first thing I think of in the morning and the last thing I think of at night. Love you, Mikey. Gran." Mike placed the book on his chest, covered his eyes, and began to sob. And that's the first chapter. Like I say, I apologise deeply for all the fumbles. I'm not a professional narrator, so you know, given to a professional narrator, somebody who can read well, that would have sounded a lot better, hopefully. But I hope you enjoyed it. Mike came out in paperback last week. We've got copies in our newly rejuvenated website at www.christopherartinian.com. And if you haven't read it already, I hope that gives you a little taste for what it's like, and I hope you might want to give it a try. So as always, thank you for all your support, guys. You take care, and I'll speak to you very soon.